I am so conservative.
Rationalized in my head. These are things I read in
And
the
I'm going to talk about Willow Creek.
Okay.
Willow Creek, a few years back, had
I
invited...
remembered at the time when Will Rogers said, I don't belong to any organized religion. I'm a Baptist.
Yeah.
I am so conservative.
If you didn't jump to conclusions, you might not get any exercise. I am so conservative.
Well, how do you like that? Welcome. And it looks like my computer is glitching up on me again, so we'll see how far we
Are
get.
we live?
I have to restart.
Oh, what happened?
I have no idea. It just kind of started stalling on me. Welcome to the Unknown Webcast. This is just a bit of a trigger warning. Technology doesn't always work. So,
and we're talking about that today, aren't we?
We are talking about technology today. Absolutely. That's so weird.
What could possibly go wrong?
Yeah, this is just a bit of a trigger warning for those who believe words are more injurious than sticks and stones. I really am so conservative. I can't turn left even when I'm driving. And now I lost my place again. This is a terrible way to start. In addition to giving trigger warnings to our viewers, Ron Hensel and I both drink coffee for your protection. This week, Mark Tabladillo joins us to discuss a Christian worldview on artificial intelligence. My name is Don Vino. I'm president of Midwest Christian Outreach, Inc. in Wonder Lake, Illinois, which produces the Unknown Webcast. And our senior researcher is Ron Hensel, who will introduce the sponsors of today's webcast. And here is Ronnie Baby.
Oh, greetings from sunny Florida, where the palm tree came outside. Shadow, now we have 12 more months of summer. Our sponsor for this edition of the Unknown, you know what? I need to go out and come back in. Hold on a second. Let me, if I don't do this right, everything's going wrong, right, Don?
Yeah.
I'm gonna say this all over. No, I'm not gonna say it all over. I'm just gonna say that our sponsor for this edition of the Unknown Webcast is Assimilation Ministries, where implanted in the body is not just a slogan. Our regular legal disclaimer: our guest on today's webcast, insert name here, that will be Mark Tabladillo, has no connection whatsoever to any of the satirical content of the Unknown Webcast, hereafter known as the webcast, although we probably will not mention it again. This satirical content includes any and all commercials, end credits, puns, smart remarks, or anything else that might fall into the definition of satire. In the meantime, Midwest Christian Outreach Inc. bears no liability for or responsibility for anyone's opinions regarding this satirical content. Notice, opinions expressed on this webcast are ours and should be yours too. If you enjoy it or if it really annoys you, to ensure your continued access, please go to midwestoutreach.org, click the yellow donate button, and contribute as you feel led. And as you do, never fear, this webcast is Y2K compliant. And don't forget to subscribe to us on your favorite video channels. Welcome to our guest, Mark Tabladillo. We used to have just fake applause. You can hear that, right? That's what I was checking to make sure we did. We actually sprung for the free, just regular fake applause. So welcome to our program. So we're interestingly, everything has gone wrong so far that can possibly go wrong. And we're here to talk about what again?
Technology. Yeah, we're talking about technology today. Mark Tabladillo is kind of our expert in residence on this particular topic. And as I was getting ready today, I did my normal startup 30 minutes early. Everything was working fine. And then I had to do a brief update with my webcam software, and everything just went downhill from that point on.
And while that was all going on, I was over here while you were out of the room, Don, for a minute before the broadcast. My office program told me I needed to update. So I updated it, and as the updates were coming on, we were into our intro, and that's when everything started glitching, and I thought, did I cause this? And then as you're turning it over to me, I'm getting a phone call,
Huh.
And it's like, that never happens. But
Well,
you know,
it
it all
happened
did today.
today as we're dealing with technology. I think somebody is
Gremlins,
unhappy about it.
gremlins.
So, uh, and it's interesting that we had actually scheduled this a few weeks back as Mark, as he's going to be at the EM&R conference next week, and he's going to be talking on this topic. And so we're trying to have those who will be at the conference speaking to be on the show to kind of help talk about their presentations and EM&R at the same time. Mark is also a member of Ratio Christi. Kind of a muckety muck, if I recall. You actually run a geographical area, right?
It is. So anyway, thanks for having me on today. I know some of my friends may be tuning in either live or we'll see this later. But just to give them context, I've been on this show a number of times. We generally talk about world religions. We talk about the Christian worldview. This will be our first time to talk about technology. So excited to see this topic.
Well, it's an important one. As you know, I have some interest in it and have for a couple of years. A friend of mine, Carl Tykrib, is very involved with this kind of a thing and looking at the transhumanism movement, which we can talk about a little bit later, because there's some of the same players involved in what we're talking about today and the transhumanism movement. And then, oddly enough, last night, Tucker Carlson, I caught just as I was surfing through the channels. He had Elon Musk on talking about this same thing. And earlier in the week, I think I sent this to both of you, an article came out in Financial Times publication, "We Must Slow Down the Race to Godlike AI." And the author here is very concerned, Ian Hogarth, about where this is going. And Elon Musk is also concerned about where this is going. So let's start with, what are we talking about here with artificial intelligence? What is the deal?
Sure. And, you know, the place I like to start now is thinking about the word technology. And in its original Greek form, it refers to craft art. So if you look at where that terminology came from, it predates electronics, and it really just has to do with the artistic expression, you know, perhaps of science. And as we've seen, there's been different technologies that have been supporting, you know, what I would generally call the Industrial Revolution for the past few hundred years. In my view, just of what's happening now in terms of technology is really just the latest iteration of what we have in terms of industrializing technologies. So there have been previous technologies. You know, we had steel industry and oil industry, and now we have a data industry. And really, it's measured in terms of data. It's not, there is such thing as an AI industry, and one can find, for example, stocks to invest in or companies to invest in that have that as their mission. But generally, I feel like the financial analysts, in terms of monetary value, they're tracking data. Data is what the currency is.
Right. Right.
And today, I think, at least for the three of us and conversations we've had in the past, we feel that whatever technology or art form is produced can be addressed by, you know, what we're calling a Christian worldview. And I want to take that just a step at a time. Again, some people may be surfing in, and this is the first talk they've heard me do on this series, and just talk about worldview, a little bit of Christianity, and then we can talk more in specific detail about some of the new events. Also, we're going to see a live demo. I've today brought my paid subscription to what's called ChatGPT 4. It's a service. It's the latest model that's released from OpenAI, which is one of Microsoft's partners for this technology. So let me just go right into maybe some ideas that, of course, Ron and Don have seen, you know, many times in terms of worldview. As I show my screen. Okay, let's see.
Click present, and then it'll let you select what you want to show.
Screen sharing is easiest with two monitors. Okay, share screen and select window or screen. Screen 2. Yes, okay.
And there you are. And now,
can you see it?
I'm going to add it to the screen. There we go.
There we go. Okay, so Christian worldview. We're not actually going to go through all my slides, but I'm just going to go through the premise here. So artificial intelligence has become increasingly important in technology and IT applications. So again, I want to focus on the first word, technology. And in this discussion that we're having today, we're thinking about it as a craft art, something that people are making, individual can make or groups can make. All right, so let's just start with that idea. First of all, preparation for the talk. I did ask people on Facebook about what questions they have about AI. Now today, actually, we're probably going to pivot more in questions that have been in recent news, but the questions I got from several years ago really are not much different than the ones that we're getting now. And these groups range from industry groups to apologetics forums. And when we say apologetics, that word means specifically defense of a worldview, in our case, the defense of the Christian worldview, as a reasonable and rational guide in a scientific world. So apologetics forums and even my personal timeline. So my questions reflect the important questions in AI for the Christian worldview, where we have a philosophical perspective. So let me give a little bit about my own experience. Okay, I've been working at Microsoft for a few years. I'm one of the trained experts at Microsoft who is delivering AI solutions to our customers. There are other people at Microsoft that are working, building our technology, and we call those our engineering teams or even perhaps our research groups. But I work mostly with direct customers in the application of solutions. So when we talk about AI, in my experience, has to do with practical questions of people using this type of technology to solve challenges. And our Microsoft mission is really to empower people everywhere to do more, kind of a human flourishing approach. Now, first of all, I want to talk about worldview. I don't have a slide on that, but the idea of a worldview is just how you look at the world. And and I suppose our common circle here, with me and Don and Ron, we're coming from a Christian worldview where we are assuming that there is such a thing as a worldview, that it does describe, how people describe and define their lives. And even if they don't have a major world faith behind that, there's still some secular worldviews that are out there that altogether do provide a guide for life. And worldviews can be distinct. Maybe they share some features with one another, but we'd also think that there is such a thing as a Christian worldview and also distinct worldviews behind world faiths that define how people think. I'm going to pause there, see if Ron or Don, you have any comments on worldview, your viewpoint.
Well, I just would narrow it down just slightly further. Yes, a Christian worldview, specifically a biblical Christian worldview, where we would subscribe, because there are others who would be more liberal and would call theirs also a Christian worldview. So we're more narrowly defined.
Okay.
All I'd say is I would note the fact that we're seeing some pushback against the concept of worldview in some academic circles. And I think, frankly, the reason is because they don't like it. And because they're really being disingenuous, because worldview really is just another word for, your philosophical presuppositions. That's really all it is.
Right. And so when they're pushing back, they're basically saying my worldview is way better than your worldview.
Right. They're trying to disarm people who disagree with them by saying you don't, and it's flat out disingenuous. So that's, if you encounter it, just ignore it.
Right. And Ron, to your point, I think there's extensive, well thought work out there, either academic or otherwise, that have described worldviews and it's how it maps to cultures, how it maps to anthropology. So it's not a new term. It's not even necessarily a Christian term, but it is an applied term that describes cultures, and more importantly, like, what do they think? And like you said, what are your presuppositions is the aspect we're mostly interested in.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think people do recognize that, sometimes cultures have different values. We're going to see some of that later when I do some of the Q&A with our live AI demo. All right, but now there have been several taxonomies, okay, that I've gone through for ethics. Let's put it this way: there is a biblical worldview, but as people have come to describe what is that biblical worldview, they have described Christian ethics in different ways. I am going to show one way today. It is not the only way I would support, but it is one way that I think can get the conversation going. And I'm going to use something called the trolley problem later on that some people have seen as far as an ethical question. So we're going to start with the categories. First, I'm going to tell you where this comes from. There is a book called Christian Ethics. It was written by Norman Geisler. It went to second edition, and then it summarizes really two. I put the summary here on two slides. First of all, he has these categories. Again, I'm not claiming that this is the only way to categorize ethics. And in fact, I was today earlier on Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. There are other ways to look at ethics. We're not trying to give a comprehensive discussion of ethics today. I may attempt to do something like that in the future. We're just using one taxonomy. I think this is a way to go. So antinomianism, that would mean that all morals are subjective. Okay, that's a viewpoint. Situationalism, we're judged according to a community norm of love. And generalism is mostly like utilitarian. What does it do for me? Community norms. And okay, in a brief, broad stroke, I see a lot of our legal codes covering what I would call, I think, the last two situations, situationalism and generalism. And they are also, kind of generically targeted toward making some workable codes for as far as ethics. And again, I'm not here today to say that ethical codes that I see used by major companies have, serious flaws in certain areas. I mean, they're often very practical. They make workable societies without necessarily having to appeal to deity for a lot of these questions. And these general standards are out there. However, at the same time, I say just even staying on this. I have another slide, which Christianity is not on this slide. Just staying on this slide, we can see that communities will have different ideas about what situations mean. What does love mean in my society? Does it mean the same thing as someone else? And it's those questions where they don't agree, which is where a lot of the debates happen. So I'm just going to pause on that. We don't have to dwell on these points a lot. Ron and Don, do you have any comments before we move on about secular ethics?
Well, one thing I would mention, I think Frank Beckwith has made a pretty compelling case on the question of differences or seeming differences in moral behaviors or moral views. And that is his argument is that essentially all cultures really agree on the basic morality, but they work it out differently. So, for example, he would say, in America, we eat beef, no problem there morally, generally speaking. Of course, that's changing now. They want us to eat bugs, but that's a different discussion. And in parts of India, they don't eat beef, and for them, that's a moral question as well. Now, his argument is we're not thinking deeply enough about it. We actually do agree, but it works itself out differently because in parts of India that believe in reincarnation, they believe that the cow, for example, is reincarnated from grandma. And in America, we don't eat grandma. So we actually agree in both countries that we don't eat grandma.
They took a vote just, very
Pardon?
early. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's just an added thought about just the question of morality. We seem to all agree on certain moral behaviors. It just works itself out differently. So I don't think. I don't want to take over that. Go ahead.
Yeah, and we don't have to resolve all the loose ends here. I still go to my original premise. I think our legal codes are largely a combination of situationalism and generalism. Would a legal code be built on antinomianism? I would argue no, not for community. However, I would still think individuals could act or behave, and in fact, even groups at times might act in areas where they have a particular moral question and they leave it unresolved and therefore subjective. So again, I'm not trying to resolve all possible ways down this topic, but here's what I'm predicting. I just had gone to an AI conference last week. It was a Christian conference called Missional AI. A good portion of the different talks had to do with ethics, period. So I think we're going to be thinking about ethics in different ways than we have thought in the past. And it's going to challenge some Christians too, because we're not just talking about moral codes from the Bible, such as the Ten Commandments, such as the Sermon on the Mount. And we're really not even talking about political spectrum here. We're talking about some other ways of looking at ethics that are going to now enter our vocabulary as we see AI applied different ways. And again, this is just one view from Norman Geisler. I think this is a good one. Let's move on because we do want to get into some of the more AI-specific questions. But I want to talk about what Geisler proposes in his book is that Jesus Christ is alive, that he is the norm, and that therefore there can be a Christian absolutism. But guess what? He's got three different ones. All right, the first one's unqualified. In other words, in the unqualified category, and he goes into this in this book, there are no such thing as moral conflicts. It's just a matter of how you look at the situation. In the conflicting category, the job of the agent is to choose a lesser evil. And then the last one here about graded absolutism is about choosing the greater good. And after reading the three ideas worked out, and again, we don't want to use this time today to talk into the differences between the three. You will find Christian thinkers that will, make different types of arguments, and even how they explain moral conflicts in the Bible. And I like the idea here of choosing the greater good, and I'm going to give more of an example of that against what I call the trolley problem, which is well known in the AI circles. But before I go there, do either of you want to make a comment on this list?
No, I think we're good on there.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so let's talk about what the trolley problem is. And again, I'm going to side on choosing the greater good. I think that's going to be the way in Christian thinking is really what God wants, although the way some people could read scripture might be choosing a lesser evil. But I don't think that's what the challenge is. So here's the trolley problem. It's well known in AI circles. And the idea here is you got a trolley coming down the track. You have an agent here at the switch. And the trolley's got so much gravity behind it that, it's not even that the engine's on, but it's just going downhill. And you can't even turn the engine off. It's going to go down the track. All right, for whatever reason, 5 people are on one of the tracks and then one person is on the other track. And the question is, how do you solve this ethical dilemma? Now, it does come to reality for anyone who owns a self-driving car. I don't have a car like that. My car now has something. It's got a cruise control that judges based on radar how fast the car should go. So if I set the speed limit, I can use it to drive in traffic. I love it. In fact, I love it more driving in traffic with that speed control on because I don't have to think about, hitting the brakes, speeding up, hitting the brakes, speeding up. It does a very good job, and I'm still up there at the wheel. All right, so here's the trolley problem, and the goal here is that the concern people have with AI is that AI will be used to make moral decisions. And yes, it has to do with self-guided vehicles. We already have people talking about self-guided trucks. Taking the trucking industry is major. Can we replace some of the drivers, perhaps with pilots or what they might call co-pilots, and have that type of challenge? All right, so let me come at it from the Christian worldview. So here's the Christian claim. On the left side, we have justice, and this goes to the key event of Christianity. We have all these guilty people. Justice is headed straight for the guilty people. And then we have this proposition that Jesus Christ is an alternative. And so one way to think about it is Jesus Christ as God decided that he would die for the sins of the world. And this is exact. So what I'm saying is you reformulate this problem. This goes to the exact story which is at the center of Christianity. And in this sense, you know, if you think about Jesus Christ being God, Jesus Christ being fully God, fully human, all right, he's making his own sacrifice. He's making a decision. I'm going to be the agent. I'm going to choose to die for the sins of the world. All right, but there's another way to look at this graph, and I'm still within Christianity. So justice is coming down the train. Guilty people are here. Jesus Christ is incarnated. He comes to earth. God the Father is at the switch. And we see this in the prayer of the Garden of Gethsemane, where Jesus Christ says, my God, why have you forsaken me? And that implies that God the Father has a power to pull that switch and make a different decision. And yet, and I go back to the last claim. There is an idea that in terms of justice, there is a greater good in allowing a bad thing to happen, which is Jesus Christ dying for the sins of the world, because that is the best outcome. I'm going to pause right there. Any comments on this?
Well,
graph?
Yeah, I'll go back to a similar issue on the question of abortion.
Mm-hmm.
If a woman is pregnant and is in jeopardy of dying if she delivers, which is pretty rare, but let's say it does, do you commit the abortion or save the life of the mother?
Mm-hmm.
And again, Beckwith, I think, does a really good job of answering that. He said, try to save both, but if you have to choose the greater good,
Mm-hmm.
then you save one and lose one. You can't, that's a decision you have to make.
Mm-hmm.
So you will lose one in that scenario, and you have to make the best choice on which one to save. You're not going to save both.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to result in abortion. So similar idea, only a greater number of people are in the question here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the mother may tell you, if she's conscious, that she would rather see the baby live.
Right, but it may be the right choice to keep the mother alive because there's other children to care for. So, now you're in a more of a dilemma.
Right, it's not easy. No.
Yeah, we're not saying these decisions are easy. And I think, as Christianity has when we have authentically presented this story about Jesus Christ, we're not thinking about it as a flippant story. It's treated with a lot of gravity in how this story is presented, and also very carefully. And I think that's reflected in the four narratives. It's not just, it could have been reflected in a 2-verse description about what happened, but I think there's more time spent on the dialogue and the actual actions around, this just basically several-day event. And it just, at least for Christians, there's a lot of weight given to the decision, even the way it's told.
Well, right, and now we're moving to AI, and as we move to AI, we have to pause for a moment to say we have a sponsor that is concerned even about this sort of issue.
Yeah, well, they're trying to look ahead. It's a very forward-looking ministry that I just lost for a second. And they have some questions. Are your churches getting a little too individualistic for your tastes? Do you often wish it wasn't so hard to fit in with the new Christians that you meet? Would you rather be part of a collective than a uniquely gifted member of a fellowship? Now you can find freedom from the hassles of having your own personal identity with Assimilation Ministries. At Assimilation Ministries, their pastoral staff is ready to relieve you of the burden of being yourself. No need to choose a new identity. They choose it for you. All their assimilations come with their trans-lifetime guarantee. Satisfaction is irrelevant. Assimilation Ministries, where implanted in the body is not just a slogan. Check them out. You need to do that.
Check them out. There you go.
So we're back to
We are.
the notes.
We're back. I will go back to screen share, or well, is it sharing? I think so. Did we lose Ron?
Well, he just stepped out. He'll be back.
Okay. Okay, let me go back to sharing the screen. All right. One of the new technologies that has fascinated people has been called ChatGPT. It's now in version 4. Microsoft made a partnership with a company called OpenAI. And when they released this most latest iteration, they released it to the general public. And I started getting questions from people who had either free access or paid access to this technology. And it does 3 things. It will generate text, it will generate code, like computer code, and it will generate images. And right now, I haven't seen the image generator. In terms of my personal interest, I'm actually less concerned or interested in the image right now. I'm very interested in the code generator because I do write code, and so I think that's a useful type tool. But as far as this audience, what's important is talking about it as a text generator. And when I was at that conference last week, that was also the focus of that conference, Missional AI. We actually were at the headquarters of Wycliffe. And Wycliffe is, in the Christian community, has been known for having a mission to translate the Bible into many languages, even languages that just have an oral tradition. They're working on those now. And so the first screen I have here on the screen is, I asked, translate brevity is the soul of wit into every language you know, and note the language name in English. So at the time, this is all based on when you do it. Okay. But at the time, what I got was these 28 languages. So it could take something and to translate it into many different topics. Okay. Let me just give you a couple of questions here that I had asked the AI. All right. I asked about AI, about atheism. Can AI lead to atheism? And it gave an answer: no, AI cannot lead to atheism. AI is a technology. And does AI support theism? And then it also says no, because it's putting itself in the neutral category. Is AI more likely to be compatible with theism or atheism? And then it's self-proclaiming, no, it's neutral. And here's I started asking a question: how can AI accelerate the development of a worldview? All right, now we're getting into an interesting question, because one of the questions that we have asked in the past about cults is, a lot of these cults are constructed. That's our viewpoint. And how were they constructed? So here's what it said. This got a very interesting answer. AI systems can be programmed to process large data sets and identify patterns, trends, and correlations that would be difficult for humans to identify on their own. This can help individuals and organizations to gain a deeper understanding of various phenomena and develop more informed and nuanced worldviews. For example, AI-powered search engines and recommendation systems can provide users with access to a wide range of information on various topics, including history, culture, philosophy, and religion. This can help individuals to explore different perspectives and develop a more comprehensive understanding of the world. Similarly, AI systems can be used to analyze social media data, online forums, and other sources of user-generated content to gain insights into the beliefs, opinions, and attitudes of different groups of people. This can help individuals and organizations to understand the perspectives of different communities in developing a more inclusive and empathetic worldview. However, it is important to note that AI is only a tool and cannot develop a worldview on its own. Developing a worldview requires critical thinking, self-reflection, and engagement with diverse perspectives, which are skills that humans must develop on their own. AI can provide the support to facilitate the development of a worldview, but it cannot replace the human capacity for reflection and understanding. Now, I want to stop right here. I'm going to point out 2 things that I think are super true. One is in terms of engaging people. In my own cult experience, which was Worldwide Church of God, one of the things that kept me engaged in the cult was the interesting ideas. So they were presenting a worldview that continued to keep us engaged kind of in an intellectual level. That's part A here, what are you presenting in terms of information? But part B, and this was not so true when I was involved in Worldwide Church of God in the last century, right? Anyway, it was an organization, it was basically a broadcast cult. So they were leaning more on what message did they have to share, which was part A. Part B is what can you learn about groups of people by how they use social media. And that is a new thing. And that is, we talked earlier about Elon Musk and what can you learn about what people are already saying? What do they already believe? And how can you tap into what they've already shared about them individually and tailor a message is actually, and I take this answer to be the more interesting part of what would be different from a data set today. In some of the new systems that Microsoft's coming up with, the M365 Copilot is going to do something similar to that. So it's going to use Chat GPT, and then it's going to marry it to what's called the Microsoft Graph. So that means all your Microsoft documents. Now, the rest of the world won't be able to see that, right? Because you're the only one who has permission to see your Microsoft documents.
Well,
but
but that doesn't mean it's going to stay that way.
Yeah, and that could be a chance for a security breach there. So you have to make sure that wall's high. But the utility of that would be talking to the AI and saying, make an appointment for me on my calendar based on what I put in an Excel spreadsheet and the list of people I have in a Word document. And that type of question is something that AI would be able to do, be able to look at your own data and put together an answer. So we're not just talking about, part A here, which is AI summarizing the world's information that's available, but part B, what can it do to gather information that we give it through cameras, through driving patterns in our AI-powered cars, or that type of thing. All right, let me just pause right there to get some response.
Well, I guess I'm skipping ahead as you're laying out what AI is and what it's currently able to do. The concerns that are being voiced now are with AGI and its influence. In fact, AI has already influenced the past elections to some degree. I'm not saying that one would have lost, that they would have turned out differently. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that it kind of AI stylized what sort of information went to what sort of people. And then it influences your thinking. So it doesn't cause you necessarily to act a certain way, but it kind of leads you to certain beliefs. What happens with AGI? I guess that's maybe the bigger issue at hand.
Yeah, artificial general intelligence. Okay, there is a longer conversation on intelligence. I happened to intersect that when I was in graduate school. I learned a technique called factor analysis, and any of our listeners who happen to be in the scientific community may know where I'm going. There was an idea, can we come up with this G fact? They literally called it G. Can we call this, is there a general intelligence metric out there and possible? And when I was younger, I was measured with the Stanford Binet test, and I was 8 years old. And based on that test administered by a psychologist, they put me in what was called the gifted program at a young age, and that kind of a second track of education when I was young. And intelligence testing was common, even in corporate America. They used to do it. Today, the question I have, and we don't have to fully answer it now, why has it fallen out of favor? Why has intelligence testing for people fallen out of favor? And some people have claimed, for example, that some tests are culturally biased, and they provided evidence for that. But, what about general tests? What about tests of mathematics? And does that even really mean something? But, it goes to another question, and these are philosophical questions. What do we want from an intelligent agent?
We haven't defined AGI really.
Yes.
Have we? I mean, what we're really talking about is like science fiction up until now. We have artificial intelligence, but it's so artificial, It's so artificial that eventually, even when working with Chat GPT, somebody who's trained in it can probably see that it's artificial.
Hmm.
Whereas maybe the common person can't. Once upon a time, the common person could see it. Now it's just becoming very subtle, very good. Artificial general intelligence is we're getting into the realm of the Matrix, HAL 9000. What is that company in Terminator that achieved sentience? There was a movie called Colossus: The Forbin Project, where
Right.
where the American computer and the Russian computer discovered each other's existence, hooked up with each other, and took over the world, and ran society for man's own good. Well, in their view, they become a tyranny. We're talking about something that where they can't be distinguished from us.
Right.
Now, is that even
I agree with that. And
possible?
Ron, here's where I think we are in culture, and I blame modernism for this, because people know each other only in certain ways. It's possible to duplicate that limited interaction with a machine. Now, does that to me add up to artificial general intelligence? The answer would be no, because of an agency question. It doesn't have actual agency. But then if you think about how people interact with one another, I was recently talking with a family friend, and we were talking about the role of anonymity on the internet. And, in general, I can be on the internet and people don't really know much about me. And the reason this is even a pertinent question,
They
with
think
Elon
they do.
Musk. Yeah, I know they know certain things,
But they think they know more than they do.
they may think, and they will attempt to construct, kind of a 3D viewpoint based on the data points that they have. And even this is even true for people we know in real life. We see them every day, and we still discover more and more about them.
How many times have you seen some, I'm going to just say it, dope, say, your tweet just told me all I need to know about you?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is like the height of absurdity. People do, alleged Christians do that all the time. But I see, but what I'm getting at is what you've described so far, like when you ask GPT questions about, worldview questions. I mean, I'm thinking, wasn't this programmed to say that?
The answer is partially. So the way GPT-4 works is it summarizes text, but it's a text generator.
Okay.
It's not just it's not a search engine. A search engine, which we're very accustomed to today, will repeat things that they see someplace else. As we go forward, Microsoft's already building this type of technology into its search engine, and we're going to see this put into search engines where they are going to generate information.
It's programmed to, this is probably a vast oversimplification, but it's programmed to parrot in a sense.
It's programmed to parrot, so you say, find the closest pizza restaurants, and it will return maybe in a natural response. There are 5 pizza restaurants that are within 15 miles from you, and here they are, and it will list them. That's a simple example, but that's generated. That's not, looking at a database and spitting out what's in a database already.
Now, some of the discussion that I was watching again last night is some of this AGI is starting to do things like just taught itself to communicate in Bangladeshi, which it was not programmed with. It just taught itself that. So as that starts developing, how is that going to impact things? They're also talking about, we already have issues with films that are made, like short films, that look like a particular politician is saying something that in fact they never said.
Right.
Right. And so deep fakes, how prevalent will that become?
Right.
That's being made
by
AGI.
How many politicians will use it as an excuse that they never said it?
Right. And even I heard one that was, again, it's an audio service, and it was actually made for people to put like put comments on a movie. I think that was the context, but people were using it in a way not intended by the producer. They were using it to make fakes. You're allowed to make a fake of yourself, but you're not allowed to make a fake of a celebrity or politician, for example. So again, people are tinkering with that, and this was on the news yesterday. So I heard, kind of the broadcaster did an example of what his AI generated voice sounded like, and it was somebody else talking. And to me, it sounded very similar. In his viewpoint, it sounded like it had a bit of an Australian accent on top of his own voice, but it was similar. So yes, we're getting the ability to parrot and mimic is very strong.
And so we're not, I mean, is there anything in AI theory or AGI theory that would say that one of the things that can be, if you will, programmed is the process of thinking as people think? Is that something they're actually saying, well, one day we'll be able to do that? In other words, sentience,
I know,
self-awareness.
Okay. Right. So to me, to answer that question has to do with people's worldview again. What do they think sentience is? And so some people are going to make early claims to that because they may have what I view is a low view of what sentience actually is. It's more of a functional type thing. And the reason that I think that's an important question even right now is because people who have a materialistic worldview, for example, they like to talk about the brain, but they don't like to talk about the mind, because the mind is a metaphysical concept. But the brain is atoms and it's chemicals. And if we can make atoms and chemicals do task A, then why can't we build something out of atoms and have something do? So they'll have, and I don't think it's even cheating. We talk about people deconstructing definitions, but I think there's already definitions out there about what does intelligence mean or what does sentience mean. This is where it's going to get into the details.
But don't materialists already have a way around that problem, the mind-body problem with Gestalt theory? The whole is greater than the sum of its parts. So somehow, when the atoms are put together in a certain way, that combination creates something greater than the combination of atoms, namely the mind.
Right.
Yeah.
And applied to this question, they would say something like these large language models were trained on way more information than any person can read or learn. I see there's books behind all of us.
Yeah.
By the way, in the current shot, there's books behind all of us.
Okay.
And if you would give any one of us exams about if we just picked a random book off the shelf and started quizzing each other about what did we get out of that book that we've already read, our memory fades. Then, I don't exactly remember. And then you say, oh yeah, I remember reading that. Well, guess what? The machine doesn't forget. And so, Ron, to your point, there's going to be people that say, well, the ability of a machine to ingest that large volume of information is beyond a human capacity. And then they're going to be satisfied.
But a mind has more than, if we assume we're whole beings, our mind is more or less representative of all of our faculties, including desires, volition, things like that. So we're talking about creating a being, really. To some extent, a dog is sentient. He is self-aware enough to know certain things about himself. And
my cat is sentient for sure.
We don't usually use that. We don't usually apply that term to animals. We usually say, no, we're sentient, they're not. But if all sentience really means that we're self-aware and aware of our world around us, we're not plants and we're not even bugs, we're something more. The reason I had to go out of the room a couple of times is because my cat's behavior, He's doing something he never did before. He wants to be in here while I'm doing this webcast. Usually he wants to get out of here when I'm doing the webcast. Today he changed his mind, for whatever reason. And he whined and whined and whined outside my door. So he has desires that I can't even predict.
Mhm.
And that what we're talking about is creating really an unpredictable entity. Let's not even call it a being. And what will it do when we create it? That's what people
Right.
are worried about, right?
And that's a big question. That is a question that is it's plaguing Elon Musk, and he had a long discussion with Sergey, who they're really on opposite ends of this particular question, because Musk was saying, "Look, we need to put in safeguards
Yeah.
here to protect humans," and Sergey's response was to call him a speciesist.
Speciesist, right? Yeah, kind of.
Okay,
Yeah,
I mean, you're all about the human race. You're a speciesist.
Starship
Musk goes,
Trooper
guilty
was
as
accused.
charged.
Starship Trooper was accused of being a speciesist movie. We're talking about species we didn't even know yet, you know. But when you talked about the computer learning how to speak another language all by itself, it reminded me of a story from a few years ago among AI, people, AI researchers, where they created, they wanted to see how two separate AI programs would interact with each other, and they watched the conversations going back and forth, and then it dawned on them, these guys are creating a new code that we can't understand
Right,
to speak with each other, and it frightened the researchers, so they shut it down.
right.
There was unpredictable behavior in the AI, and what does
Mhm.
that portend for going forward with this technology?
Right. So one of the things right now is that even in the OpenAI service, the service as it is today works on prompts, and the way to make it work the best is to do what's considered, maybe immoral in many courts of law, and that is you have to ask it leading questions. You have to exactly tell it what you're trying to get out of it. Lead it to an answer, not just give an open-ended question.
Isn't it
And so
true?
yeah, isn't it? Yeah, and one of the examples I saw today had to do with coding, programming languages, and what they're finding is useful, especially if you want to have a lot of code, is just to have the AI describe what it's going to do, but not write any code. Don't write any code yet, but tell me how you would approach this problem. This is literally a story I put in my tweet feed today, because this is how they're using it to generate code. And by the way, it's also how you would get it to generate a book. You would have it do the chapters first, and then talk about the chapters, both back and forth. And then once you're satisfied, say, okay, now I want the subchapters. And then now I want you to go ahead and write, what the text would be for those subchapters. And then it can go back and do that type of thing. But, I didn't show it on the screen. Right now, the AI is filtering. You can tell a joke, for example, about Jesus, but in the current ChatGPT 4, you cannot tell a joke about Muhammad. It will not do it.
Wow.
Interesting.
No. Why? Because it's actually being filtered. So there's some filtering either on the input or on the output can be done as the safeguard. So let's go to, at least this generation of systems, and I think for the foreseeable future, is going to have either input or output filters where the organization can provide either legal or ethical or moral viewpoints about what goes in and what comes out. And to me, right now, that is the main concern. Now, some people can roll their own AI and maybe run that on their own machine, where they get to determine what the filter is. But we're back at human behavior, and is this completely AI? No, it's not completely AI at that point.
Okay. Huh. So, should we be afraid?
I think, to me, it still goes back to trust but verify. And I'm not like a bleeding edge technology person. I don't like to use the newest version of anything until I see how it's been used. I was a late adopter to the smartphone. I was a late adopter to text messaging. By the time I got in text messaging, some people were beginning to stop doing it. And any of these technologies has both advantages and disadvantages, and I think there's always a moral component to any types of activities we do. I hope we haven't lost Don.
Well, he's up and around. He's attending to something.
Okay.
Because really, that's. I mean, I guess my metaphysical presuppositions preclude me from saying we're actually going to create a new intelligent life form,
Right.
that will be deserving of. We're not going to create Data on Star Trek. I don't even really think that's possible. I think it is possible to create something that, we don't even really know how our own brain works. And we don't know to what extent what we do. If I read the Bible correctly, if I believe and trust in that document, that text, then it tells me that my mind will go on to exist after my brain ceases to exist. That I will still have thoughts and memories and the ability to communicate. Paul said in 2 Corinthians that he was taken up to the third heaven, and he doesn't know whether it was in the body or out of the body. So he wasn't told how it happened, and so he, interestingly, was open to the idea that he had an out-of-body experience, but through the power of God. So if that's possible, if this is my faith, if this is what my faith teaches me, then it's very difficult for me to accept that this is something we can do. We are made in God's image, and we are not creators, but we've obviously been given from our Creator the ability to do very amazing things. And the question is, every time we do really amazing things, they are used for very evil purposes. And that is really, I think, the bottom line for me.
Yeah. I think there's a lot to be concerned about. And Ron, what I like about your summary there is in the Christian worldview, we have a high value on the word soul as a distinguishing feature of Homo sapiens. And when you think about artificial general intelligence as a phrase, it's being talked as who is smarter. Is the computer smarter, or is the Nobel Prize winner smarter? You see that they're setting up a different type of race. And I don't think that is kind of the distinguishing feature of humans and human communities. So where I think Christians can come from in terms of being contributors in science and technologies, asking the philosophical questions, what really is it just biblical evidence for the soul? I think we would say no. I think we can make the case from natural theology, evidence that people have memories, evidence that people can have, for example, counterfactual realities. One of the things too, I was thinking about how these engines are being trained. I remember even growing up, when I would go to my local library, I loved the nonfiction section. I wasn't interested in reading fictional books as a child. I used to read, small books, like I remember Curious George and small books like that as stories, but I never really got into novel reading as a reader. I was more interested in cruising the nonfiction. And if you took the volume of our local library, and I can still remember today, I don't think it was even more than 40% of the books were nonfiction in our local library. Why am I bringing this up? Because a thought that occurred to me is that how are these engines being trained? They're actually being trained on a lot of fictional information. They're being trained by things from science fiction, ideas that are, and we create it ourselves. I'm not against science fiction. I love science fiction. I love Spider-Man is my favorite character in that world. But what I'm saying is that a machine can only report back what it's being given. And if it is a mirror of whatever, it goes into it. Now, going forward, yes, people are going to ask the question, how should we train it? I just saw a new search engine being promoted. It's being developed in Sweden. And what they're trying to do is base it on information that does not come from commercial websites. Because if you scrape the web, for example, and you'll get a lot of information about commercial websites and what they're trying to sell and that type of thing. Well, they don't want all that in their search engine, so they're taking a different approach. They're going to only put in certain types of information. So again, it is a question. At the moment, there's a lot of intelligent design going into AI, which to me is the counter to the Darwinian naturalist viewpoint that things just happen at random.
We could have just let that silicon sit in a lab and wait for it to develop I mean, I think
if just grow arms and eyes, and
if we gave it a few million years, I think I don't know what the hurry was.
So those are some of the ideas out there. There's going to be a lot going on to test this going forward. I didn't get to show. They have taken ChatGPT-4 in its previous iteration. They've given it some of the well-known tests like the SAT, the GRE, AP tests, and some other ones. And they have to have had collaboration with the people who produce these commercial tests to be able to do this. But they've done a research study and they've shown it's done a lot better.
Well, to me, the ultimate test will be rock, paper, scissors. I mean, if so, yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, you're right on the score of intelligence and soul and common sense. Can you build common sense into artificial intelligence?
And can an artificial intelligence really tell a good joke? I mean, without just repeating what somebody else, without stealing material like so many comedians do,
Yeah.
I think that'll be a good test if they can surprise us with humor. No, I'm just kidding. I don't think they'll ever do that.
Well, I know that one of the concerns of those who are involved with this, as I mentioned earlier, are will it be stoppable? When you hit AGI, will it be able to teach itself enough that we won't even be able to unplug it? And will you have a Foreman project on your hands, essentially.
Right, where they took over the power grid and they couldn't even unplug it. Yeah.
Right. So, and obviously, I don't know how to answer that, and I guess I'm not as concerned as they are because I have a biblical worldview, a Christian worldview, which tells me that ultimately God is in control, regardless of what. Here's someone suggested, and I've been thinking about this, that we need to maybe write another book, Ron.
Maybe
the Tower of Babel 2.0. Reversing the curse. Because what happened to Babylon is they confounded the languages. What is AI and AGI accomplishing? It is unifying the language across the planet. And there's an interesting book I would suggest everyone maybe needs to look at. It's called The Wolf in Their Pockets. It's written by a pastor. And he's kind of dealing with how social media is transforming the planet. And he talks about a study they did here in South America, where they had a set of questions, and they would ask if you were, say, over 40. Pretty much everyone answered the questions in the same way about their area. What's most important? Well, what's most important is family, rain. We need rain so we can grow crops. And his point as he was setting it up is, if you grew up in, let's say, Iowa in the 1950s. Everybody in the teen years would basically hold the same worldview in your area. And then they would have a different worldview, perhaps in South America. But today, because of this kind of technology, you ask someone that's over 40 certain questions, and they'll pretty uniformly have the same answers for their worldview in their area. Yeah. But if you ask under that age, what you're going to find is they're not really concerned about, rain or corn growth, or they're worried about Black Lives Matters in South America. Why?
Well,
because it's trained by social media from the U.S.
It's how countercultural narratives have spread. In other words, in Iowa, there might have been the odd person in the 60s who read Betty Friedan and was a feminist. In the 70s, there were a lot more people who read Cosmo in central Iowa, and became, I mean, because that was at Kmart, or that was at,
Right.
you could see that everywhere, and then it just, I mean, it begins to spread in cable,
Well,
and
and
it's like
now
each decade has its own.
spreading through this device across the planet.
It's like, it reminds me of the story when the protesters stormed the Capitol in Sacramento when Ronald Reagan was governor, and he let them into his office, and they were questioning his ability to run the country because, it says, well, where were you? Your generation didn't even have mass communication. What were you doing then? He goes, well, we were making all that stuff for you, and it's like, well, where did it get us? Well, it got us to where we
and
are.
always, this is kind of a big topic. We knew we wouldn't get through the whole thing today. Our little glitches in the beginning kind of slowed us down slightly, but
I think the artificial intelligence that's really running the web knew what we were going to talk about, and they.
I think you're exactly right. So if you want to know more, go to the EM&R conference, emnr.org, which is in Tallahassee, Florida, next weekend, next Friday and Saturday. Mark will be there. I'll be there. We're not going to let Ron be there, but
No, they voted me off the island this year.
well,
You know,
off the island.
When you said if you want to know more, it reminded me of that computer that was on RoboCop. Do you want to know more? He kept asking that question.
Yeah.
So
Anyway, Ron, would you walk us out of here?
I would be glad to do that. Let's give credit to whom credit is due. Our resident cult leader profiler is Neil before me. Our wardrobe manager is See How It Fits You. Our culinary services are provided by Chef Ham and Cheese. Tinfoil hat provisioner is Just In Case. Jehovah's Witnesses coverage comes from Armageddon and D Opposer. Our Mormon archives manager is Polygamous. Our liberal denominations bureau chief is Lucy Goosey. Our transgender issues coverage comes from Ben Hur. Special correspondent for cults based on the Hindenburg disaster and flying turkeys. Oh, humanity. Our fact-checking supervisor is Yoleg. Pulling technical assistance comes through Mercury Research. Our legal advisors are at the law firm of Dewey, Cheatham & Howe. Grievance resolution director is Giovanna Pisamini. Director of privacy assurance is Wiretapping. And original idea sourcing comes from Drew A. Blank. The Unknown Webcast is a production of Midwest Christian Outreach Inc. in cooperation with Emergency Manicure Productions, both of whom are solely responsible for this content, although you will never be able to prove that in a court of law. And why is my little copyright cut off at the bottom of the screen?
I really
things are happening.
Everything's kind of glitching up today, and I don't know if it's on their end, our end, or whose end. But let's get our ends out of here.
Let's get okay.
See you all later.
Bye-bye.